Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Doug, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I rise today and to focus on, once again, a time in Black history. Black history is about trials and tragedy and triumphs for enslaved Africans and the African Americans in this nation. Our journey has been like a roller coaster, encapsulated by highs and lows, twists and turns, periods of great darkness filled with trials and tragedy, but also periods of brilliant light, reflecting countless triumphs over heartbreaking obstacles. I've always been intrigued with those symbols of darkness and light, of trials, tribulations, and triumph. But it was the inquisitive nature and sharp observance of my then 4-year-old granddaughter who saw one of the iconic VCU buildings that was erected and began to question me about the building. That day, I learned a very valuable lesson about symbolism. The profound impact that symbolism or symbol has on the psyche is worthy of a pause. So I pause today to talk about symbolism and images and in terminology as it relates to Black history. This moment and these times, I'd hope all of us would see as a teachable moment that will help each of us to help to move Virginia forward. This is not about offending anyone or creating a sense of guilt. It is just to create a better understanding of some very sensitive issues for America and especially for the African American history. And doing some research on the impact of symbolism on the brain, it is said that symbols are the shortcut for our brains. We are surrounded by symbols and they are woven into our society so intricately that we don't even notice. Visual symbols can be complex because often there is more going on in an image than meets the eye or that will be stated in a paragraph. All of us are familiar with that big yellow arch on the top of a fast food restaurant. It is a symbol that a child learns early. Ask any 1-year-old child and they will tell you. To me, it just means a McDonald's is close by. But to a child, it means that there's a McDonald's, there are French fries, chicken McNuggets, and I want to go there right now. Once a symbol is seen by someone, it can basically find refuge in their brain. It has often been said a picture is worth 1,000 words. Symbols can be served as a virtual time machine, instantly transporting the person back to the time and place where the symbol was first created, and bringing them back to mind the vast richness or pain, hurt or trauma, and definition that that symbol represented. So, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, over the past few weeks, many of us have had to relive a tumultuous time as it relates to knowledge and pain. While others may have had to relive conversations that parents and grandparents had with them about racially challenging moments in time. There are some symbols that are embedded on the hard drive of our minds. Every now and then, these symbols and their messages suddenly resurface, just as if it had been transported in a time machine. It resurfaced with the Charlottesville riot. It resurfaced every time Donald Trump says there are good people on both sides. It resurfaced every time an African American life is snatched away because they are Black, like the situation in South Carolina at Mother Emanuel Methodist Church. So here are a few symbols that are still traumatizing for African Americans. The symbol of KKK, the white hood and robe uniform and a cross burning. It is quite traumatizing. Whether there is a symbol in a book, in the backwoods of a little town, or on Darbytown Road, they were traumatizing for the African American communities across the South. And although the cross burning dates back to the medieval Europe, when Scottish Klansmen would set fire to hillsides as a statement of military defiance. The actual burning of the cross by men in white hoods and robes was introduced into the African American community as a form of domestic terrorism. Mr. Speaker, we would never forget the symbol of a cross burning, the symbol of a noose. I had the unfortunate situation to see one firsthand hanging from a tree on the slave trail. Research indicates that the hangman's noose has become one of the most powerful visual symbols directed against African Americans, comparable in the emotions to that of a swastika for Jews. Its origins are connected to the history of lynching in America, particularly in the South after the Civil War, when violence or threat of violence replaced slavery as one of the most main forms of social control that was used against African Americans. The noose quickly became associated with the Ku Klux Klan and invoked feelings of terror. Getting to a symbol that each of us have had to deal with the last 2 weeks, the symbol of blackface. The intentional mockery of and defamation of African Americans and their culture through comedy, variety act, dancing, and musical performances that were intended to reinforce the idea that African Americans were inferior in every way. And African Americans were routinely portrayed as lazy buffoons who needed supervision and oversight. Beyond that, blackface and systemic social and political repressions are so intricately linked that according to C. Van Woodward's history, the strange career of Jim Crow, the very term Jim Crow, derives from an 1832 blackface minstrel number by Thomas D. Wright. There are many, many symbols that I'm absolutely sure African Americans detest. And so as we reflect on the past few weeks, the recurring question is, where do we go from here? And in order to answer that question, I propose that we look at the hardcore, difficult, untold, and sometimes rewritten history of this Commonwealth. When we actually come face to face with this difficult history, it is uncomfortable. In fact, it's very uncomfortable, because oftentimes the topic has been taboo and swept under the rug, pushed way, way, way back in the corner of a basement or in the hidden pages of yearbooks, often only talked about in hushed whispers or marginalized with inappropriate humor and hurtful gibes. Well, the past 2 weeks has been an example of coming face to face with our difficult history. And the consciousness of America has been raised in the eyes of our own Virginia. We have been forced to look at a culture of racial insensitivity that raises the issue of reconciling conflict images of people we know and respect. So in this teachable moment, I ask this body and everyone that's listening to be open and honest dialogue, to embrace the challenges and truth and reconciliation about Black history, Virginia's history, and America's history. So let us create a paradigm shift that will create a bold new symbol of unity and reconciliation in this great Commonwealth. Let that symbol finally gives us the freedom to change some of the things that have been boxed up, buried, and hidden for too long. Let that symbol guide us as legislators to do that which improves the lives of all citizens. Let that symbol be one that when we see it, we are filled with pride. Let that symbol be one of a second chance for us to get it right and to live up to the true beauty of democracy. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We owe it to our ancestors. We owe it to ourselves. But most importantly, we owe it to our children. And so on today, February the 14th, 2019, it should be understood that the tool, the symbol we need to help us overcome the obstacles that we are facing today is love. And I know it may sound corny, but I want to close with these lyrics from this song. But what the world needs now is love, sweet love. For it's the only thing that there is just too little of. The symbol of Virginia should absolutely be love. After all, our official motto is Virginia is for lovers. Happy Valentine's Day, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.